Hello guys, welcome to the Coin Riches channel. This coin was found in an old suitcase, forgotten, dusty, and almost thrown away during a simple home cleanup. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than spare change, just another small coin mixed with buttons, keys, and memories from another time. But what happened next shocked everyone involved. That tiny coin, resting quietly for decades, turned out to be something far more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined. Before we go deeper into this unbelievable story, make sure you subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell. Because the coin you ignore today could be the treasure that changes your tomorrow. And stories like this are happening more often than people realize. Now imagine this: you open an old drawer, a metal box, or maybe a suitcase that hasn't been touched in years. Inside, you find coins from your childhood, from travel, or from relatives who are no longer here. Most people would simply close the box and move on. But collectors, historians, and treasure hunters see things differently. They look closely. They ask questions. And sometimes, they discover history hiding in plain sight. That is exactly how the story of the 1992 Malaysian 10-cent coin begins. In the early 1990s, Malaysia was going through a period of transformation. Economically, culturally, and socially, the country was stepping into a new era. Coins minted during this time weren't just tools of everyday trade, they became silent witnesses of a nation evolving. Millions of these coins were produced for circulation, used in markets, buses, school canteens, and roadside stalls. They passed through countless hands, each coin carrying tiny invisible stories, but here's the part most people never think about. Not every coin from a common year remains common forever. Some coins become rare not because they were meant to be rare, but because of what happens after they leave the mint. Production variations. Small design inconsistencies. Limited batches. Minting quirks that only experts notice years later. These are the hidden factors that quietly transform ordinary coins into extraordinary collectibles. The 1992 Malaysian 10-cent coin is one of those coins that lives in that mysterious space between ordinary and legendary. At first glance, it looks simple. Small, lightweight, and familiar in shape. A coin that once bought candy, bus fare, or a quick snack. For many people across Southeast Asia, it was just daily life in metal form. Nothing flashy. Nothing dramatic. Just another coin among thousands. But collectors began noticing something unusual years later, when older coin collections started resurfacing. Inherited albums, estate sales, antique markets, certain 1992 10-cent coins began drawing attention. Not all of them. Only a handful. And that's when curiosity started turning into obsession among serious collectors. What made some of these coins different? It wasn't something obvious like gold or diamonds. It was subtle. The kind of detail that hides in plain sight. Slight variations in strike sharpness. Unusual preservation levels. Coins that somehow escaped heavy circulation and survived in near-perfect condition. And in the world of coin collecting, condition is everything. A coin that survived decades without scratches, fading, or heavy wear becomes more than money. It becomes a time capsule, and that's where the mystery deepens. Because coins are not supposed to survive untouched. They are meant to travel, to wear down, to lose their shine. Yet sometimes, a few coins slip through time almost untouched. Maybe they were saved by someone who forgot about them. Maybe they were sealed away in envelopes, drawers, or luggage. Maybe they were part of a small untouched batch that never fully entered circulation, and when those coins finally reappear, decades later, collectors pay attention. By the late 2010s and early 2020s, the global coin collecting community began expanding rapidly. Online auctions, private collectors, and numismatic enthusiasts started rediscovering Southeast Asian coins that had been overlooked for years. Suddenly, coins once considered pocket change were being re-examined under magnification, lighting, and expert evaluation. And that's when whispers about the 1992 Malaysian 10-cent started growing louder. Stories began circulating about rare examples surfacing in unexpected places. A coin found in an inherited wallet. Another discovered inside an old travel bag. One reportedly spotted in a forgotten piggy bank during a house renovation. Each story added another layer to the coin's growing legend, but what truly drives collectors isn't just rarity. It's the combination of rarity and story. Coins with stories carry emotional gravity. They connect generations. They turn metal into memory, and the 1992 10-cent coin has that emotional pull. Think about it. A coin that may have once passed through a schoolchild's hand. A coin that might have been part of a street vendor's change. A coin that traveled through markets filled with life and noise. And now, decades later, that same coin could be resting silently somewhere, waiting to be rediscovered. This is what makes coin hunting so addictive. The idea that history might be sitting quietly in your own home, and here's the truth most people don't realize: rare coins are rarely found in museums first. They are found in homes. In drawers. In suitcases. In jars filled with forgotten change. That's why stories like the old suitcase discovery feel so powerful. Because they are relatable. Almost anyone has an old storage box somewhere. Almost everyone has ignored coins at some point in life, but a few people choose to look closer, and those people sometimes change their lives forever. Now imagine holding a coin in your hand and realizing it has survived more than 30 years. Through moves, weather, ownership changes, and time itself. A small circular survivor from another era. That realization alone can shift how you see everyday objects. Suddenly, coins stop being small, they start becoming artifacts, and when collectors recognize that transformation, demand begins to grow quietly. Not loudly like trends. But slowly, steadily, like a rising tide. Few notice at first, because the rare coin world doesn't explode overnight. It builds silently, fueled by knowledge, patience, and awareness. And awareness is the turning point. The moment someone learns that an ordinary-looking coin might hold extraordinary potential, everything changes. They start checking old collections. Asking relatives. Looking through storage boxes that haven't been opened in years. Some find nothing, but some find surprises, and sometimes, those surprises rewrite their understanding of value completely. The 1992 Malaysian 10-cent coin represents that possibility. Not a guaranteed fortune for everyone. Not every coin is valuable. But the existence of rare examples changes how people look at what they already owe. It introduces a powerful question into everyday life: what if something small I ignored is actually important? That question alone has fueled countless real-life discoveries across the world, and it's why stories like this continue spreading. Not because every coin is valuable, but because the possibility is real enough to matter. If you think about it, the most fascinating treasures in history were rarely discovered by experts first. They were found by ordinary people who noticed something unusual and chose not to ignore it. Curiosity creates discovery, and discovery creates opportunity. So the next time you see an old coin, don't rush past it. Hold it for a moment. Look at the year. Notice the details. Ask where it might have traveled and what it might have witnessed. Because sometimes, history doesn't shout, sometimes, it whispers through small forgotten things, and sometimes, those whispers are worth more than anyone ever expected. As interest in overlooked coins began to grow, something fascinating started happening behind the scenes. Quiet conversations between collectors became more intense. Small online forums turned into meeting points for people who had spent decades studying coins that most of the world ignored. And slowly, attention began shifting toward coins that carried hidden potential rather than obvious fame. The 1992 Malaysian 10-cent coin started appearing in these conversations more often, not as a headline coin. Not as a world-famous rarity. But as something far more intriguing: a sleeper coin. The kind of coin that quietly builds importance over time without attracting too much noise. In the early years. In the collector world, sleeper coins are powerful. They are the coins people overlook today and regret tomorrow, and what makes a sleeper coin fascinating is unpredictability. No one rings a bell announcing its rise. No official warning. No countdown. Just a gradual shift in perception among people who study patterns deeply. Collectors began noticing that certain preserved examples of the 1992 10-cent had characteristics that made them stand out. The way the details held up. The sharpness in design elements that should have faded with heavy use. The rare presence of coins that somehow avoided the rough journey most circulating coins experience. and this is where coin collecting becomes almost philosophical, because value doesn't always come from what something is made of. It often comes from what something has survived. Time is the ultimate filter. Most coins from any year are worn down, scratched, or lost. But a few survive almost untouched, like survivors of a quiet storm no one noticed. And those survivors carry a kind of rarity that cannot be recreated. That's what started drawing deeper attention to certain 1992 Malaysian tens and coins. Collectors who specialized in condition-based rarity began hunting for pristine examples. Not easy to find. Not easy to verify. But when one appeared, it sparked serious discussion. Private offers. Silent negotiations. The kind of activity that rarely reaches the public eye. And while the world kept using coins casually, a small group of people started looking at them very differently. They saw patterns, they saw timelines, they saw potential, because seasoned collectors understand something most people don't: the future value of a coin often depends on how many people ignored it in the past. And coins that lived in the shadows often have the most surprising journeys. By this point, the story becomes less about metal and more about human behavior. Why do people overlook certain things? Why do we assume small means insignificant? Why do we dismiss everyday objects without questioning their history? These questions drive the psychology of rare discoveries. Think about how many times people throw away jars of old coins during house cleaning. How often families divide belongings without checking small details. How many inherited items are passed along without anyone realizing what they contained. In that constant cycle of forgetting and rediscovering, rare coins quietly move through generations, and sometimes, they wait in drawers that won't be opened for years, they wait in envelopes tucked between books, they wait in suitcases stored in attics, garages, and storage rooms. Waiting silently for the moment someone curious decides to look closer. The suitcase story you heard at the beginning reflects something very real. Not because every suitcase holds treasure, but because history has a strange way of hiding in ordinary places, and coin collectors know this better than anyone. They don't just study coins. They study human habits. They understand that people overlook small things. They know that forgotten objects often outlive expectations. And they recognize that time transforms the meaning of everyday items. That understanding is what keeps them searching. But there's another layer to this story that makes it even more compelling. Rarity alone doesn't create fascination. Emotion does. When someone discovers that a coin from their childhood could hold serious value, the reaction is rarely calm. It's a mix of disbelief, excitement, and curiosity. Memories resurface. Questions multiply. And suddenly, something that once felt ordinary becomes deeply personal. That emotional shift is powerful, because value becomes more than numbers. It becomes a story, and stories travel faster than facts. Once a few stories about rare 1992 Malaysian tents and discoveries began circulating, interest naturally grew. People who had never cared about coins started paying attention. Families began revisiting old collections. Younger viewers became curious about items their grandparents once kept without explanation. Awareness began spreading quietly but steadily, and awareness changes everything. Because once people become aware, they start noticing details they ignored before. They begin asking questions like, where did this coin come from? How long have we had it? Has anyone ever checked it carefully? And those questions create ripple effects. A single discovery inspires another search. A single story sparks another conversation. And slowly, what was once forgotten becomes meaningful again. This is how hidden collectibles rise into relevance, not through sudden explosions, but through gradual awakenings. The 1992 Malaysian tents and coin found itself riding that wave of rediscovery. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But steadily gaining attention among people who value patience over hype. And here's something deeply fascinating about patience in the collector world. Patience rewards observers. While most people chase trends, collectors watch time. They understand that true rarity often reveals itself slowly. They are willing to wait years, even decades, for overlooked items to gain recognition, and when recognition finally arrives, it often surprises everyone else, because from the outside, it looks sudden, but from the inside, it was always building. This is why stories about rare coins feel almost mythical. They seem to appear out of nowhere. A coin no one talked about suddenly becomes the center of attention. A forgotten piece of metal becomes the subject of intense discussion, and people wonder how they missed it, but the truth is simple: they didn't miss it, they just didn't know where to look. Knowledge creates vision, and vision reveals opportunity. This idea sits at the heart of every rare coin story. The difference between ignoring and discovering often comes down to awareness. The moment you start seeing everyday objects differently, the world itself feels different. You begin noticing history in places you once overlooked, you start questioning assumptions you once accepted, you realize that value and size are not the same thing, and once that realization settles in, curiosity becomes permanent. You can't unsee the possibility anymore. That's why stories like the 1992 Malaysian tens and coin resonate so strongly, especially with people who have lived through decades of change. People who understand how quickly time passes. People who have seen objects rise and fall in importance. People who know that yesterday's ordinary can become tomorrow's extraordinary. For viewers in the 35 to 65 and beyond age group, this idea hits differently. Because it connects directly with lived experience. With memories. With items stored not for value, but for sentiment, and sometimes, sentiment and value cross paths in unexpected ways. A coin kept as a souvenir. A coin saved from travel. A coin held onto without reason, until one day, curiosity knocks, and everything changes. But as we move closer to the final part of this story, one question naturally rises above all others. What happens when curiosity meets reality? What happens when someone finally realizes that the small coin they almost ignored might carry a shocking level of importance? That moment, the moment of realization, is where stories transform from interesting to unforgettable. And then comes the moment every treasure story quietly builds toward, the moment when possibility turns into reality. Imagine sitting at a table with a small coin in front of you. No dramatic music. No flashing lights. Just silence, curiosity, and a growing feeling that something about this coin is different. You've already checked the year. You've compared the details. You've noticed the unusual sharpness, the preservation, the way it seems to have escaped the wear of time, and suddenly, the question that once felt distant becomes very real: what if this is one of the rare ones? That single thought can change the way your heart beats. Because now, it's no longer just about a coin. It's about discovery. About timing. About the realization that something ordinary may have quietly carried extraordinary potential for decades. This is the emotional turning point that makes rare coin stories unforgettable, not the value alone, but the realization, because value without realization is invisible. For years, many rare coins sit unnoticed simply because no one recognizes them. They move through homes silently, blending into everyday life. And then one day, someone looks closer. Someone asks questions. Someone becomes curious enough to see what others missed, and in that moment, history wakes up. The 1992 Malaysian tens and coin represents that awakening. A reminder that time doesn't just pass, it transforms. It reshapes how we see objects, memories, and meaning itself. Things we once ignored gain new weight. Small items begin carrying larger stories, and perhaps the most powerful part of this journey is what it teaches us about awareness, because awareness is the real treasure. The coin is just the symbol. When you become aware that something small can hold significance, your entire perspective shifts. You begin to slow down. To notice details. To question assumptions. And once that mindset takes root, you start seeing potential in places you never looked before. This is why so many life-changing discoveries begin with curiosity rather than luck. Luck may open the door, but curiosity walks through it, and for many people who stumble upon rare collectibles later in life, the experience feels deeply personal. It's not just about money. It's about validation. A quiet confirmation that paying attention matters. That patience matters. That the past still has the power to surprise us. For viewers who have spent decades building families, careers, and memories, this message resonates deeply. Because it connects with something universal, the idea that time always leaves clues behind, clues in photographs, clues in letters, clues in small objects we almost throw away, and sometimes, those clues take the shape of coins. The old suitcase story you heard at the beginning isn't powerful because it promises instant wealth. It's powerful because it reflects a truth most people recognize. We all have forgotten corners in our lives. Drawers we haven't opened. Boxes we haven't touched. Items we once stored, just in case, and never revisited, and hidden inside those forgotten spaces, time waits patiently, not loudly. Not urgently. Just quietly waiting for curiosity to return. This is why stories like this continue to captivate millions of people around the world. They remind us that discovery is not limited to adventurers or experts. Sometimes, discovery belongs to ordinary people who decide to look twice instead of once, people who pause, people who wonder, people who refuse to assume that small things are meaningless, and when those people share their stories, they create ripple effects. They inspire others to check their own forgotten spaces. To revisit old collections. To reconnect with objects they once ignored. Awareness spreads, and with awareness comes possibility. But here's something important to understand as we reach the end of this journey. Not every 1992 Malaysian 10-cent coin will change a life. Most remain simple pieces of history, valuable more for memory than money. And that truth matters. Because it keeps the story honest. However, the existence of rare, highly sought-after examples changes everything, because it proves that extraordinary versions do exist. That it proves that time can elevate the smallest objects, and it proves that discovery is always possible for those who stay curious. And now we arrive at the moment many people wait for, the question that lingers quietly in every viewer's mind. What could a truly rare, exceptional example of this coin be worth, in the world of collectibles? Value is shaped by rarity, condition, demand, and timing. When these elements align, even the smallest coins can cross astonishing thresholds. Auctions, private collectors, and specialized buyers sometimes push prices into territories that feel almost unreal to outsiders, and that brings us to the most shocking part of this story. There have been discussions in private collector valuations suggesting that an extremely rare, pristine 1992 Malaysian 10-cent coin, the kind preserved in near-perfect condition and recognized by serious collectors, could reach values as high as $111,000. Yes, a small coin once used for everyday purchases. Potentially reaching a six-figure level under the right circumstances. And when people hear numbers like that, the reaction is always the same: silence first, then disbelief, then a slow, powerful realization, because suddenly, coins stop being background objects. They stop being noise in a drawer or weight in a jar. They become possibilities. They become questions waiting to be answered, and whether someone ever finds a rare example or not, the deeper impact of stories like this goes far beyond numbers. They remind us to stay curious. To stay aware. To respect the quiet history sitting in our homes. To understand that value often hides in places we overlook the most, because sometimes, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is simply attention. So tonight, or tomorrow, or the next time you come across an old box, a suitcase, or a forgotten collection, pause for a moment. Open it slowly. Look carefully. Not with expectation, but with curiosity, because the world is full of stories waiting to be rediscovered, and sometimes, those stories are small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. And if this story made you see coins differently, make sure you subscribe and stay connected. Because the next life-changing discovery might already be closer than you think, quietly waiting to be found.